welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities and politicians and perspectives. If I could just get the lady who co-owns this show to be quiet for a second, we come on the air and talk about something today. I'm not sure what. Do you have any kudos this morning, Mrs. Busby?
Oh, gosh, do I ever. Thank you for
Oh,
asking.
my goodness, I opened up the floodgates.
Well,
just sit back, Mark.
I called Jim Ash, and...
well, he is everybody's hero.
Yes, he is. Because, as I was telling our guest here, I lost my dog last week. And it was a bad day, because I may not be much, but he and I are all we have. And Jim was kind enough, and I called Paul Adams, and I was going to call you next to ask if you'd ask your people to look. Because he's not a pup anymore, you know, he's 12. He and I are both getting older. And, you know, that's a hard thing. Yeah. And Bill got in his car and I got in my car. We drove around looking for that darn dog. Well, finally, some blessed heart took him out to the vets and dropped him off. And they called, and I was glad. I mean, I was really glad. And I just want to thank people for caring. Murphy's not worth big bucks or anything.
Well, he's a nice dog.
But he's a nice dog, yeah. And I was missing him bad. So thank you, James. You're a nice man, in spite of what your wife said.
Oh, I think we better get on with the program.
All righty.
We have a guest that took a special time today. He is, right now they're a little busier than usual. For no other reason than routine calls, and which are onerous at best. So I want to thank the sheriff for being here and invite him on.
Oh, yeah. And I've kind of known him second, third hand for an awful lot of years because his mom and my daughter worked together. Yes, and Mark Landers is a good egg, a good egg. And we're lucky to have you, Mark.
Yeah.
Now, how many people do you have on the sheriff's entire staff?
Well, currently we're at about 13 deputies, road deputies. I guess I should say sworn personnel, and we have currently 7 full-time correctional staff. We're down a few. We're currently hiring. We've got our advertisement out there. We're hiring patrol deputies and correctional staff.
Okay.
So the advertisements in the local papers, and we've got it on our website as well. It tells you the process of going through that.
What's the basic qualification, Sheriff, for somebody who might want to?
So for a patrol deputy, we require high school education. You have to be 21 years of age. We have implemented a hiring process where there's an entry-level test that folks take. It's the first step in the process. After that, it's pretty involved. We do an oral board interview, and then there's a thorough background investigation. After that, there's a polygraph examination along with a psychological examination, and then drug testing, and then a conditional offer of employment.
Are these examinations something that you've instituted?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, what a good idea.
Well, you know, in today's world, we're just out there looking for the best applicants, the best qualified candidates. You know, we've had some turnover at the sheriff's office. We're looking for, I know we got a bunch of good local, you know, young men and women that law enforcement's not what it was even 10 years ago. It's a tough occupation to get into. The pay's not, you know, what's out there and comparable to some other jobs. A lot of negative publicity on law enforcement in the last decade or so. But it is an honorable occupation. I truly believe that. I do believe it's a calling.
And you know, that's such a change from when Bill and I were kids. My dad was with the volunteer fire department, and they were in the same edifice in Robbinsdale, which is a suburb of Minneapolis.
That's just a big word she used. She wanted people to know she
different. It was you I was trying to impress, bud.
She
anyway,
just wanted to impress us all.
My brothers and I thought that those policemen that were in the building too just walked on water. We looked up so to them. What happened?
You know, I wish I had the answer to that. There has been a paradigm shift. Even me growing up, a local kid, part of the Explorer program that the sheriff's office used to have, looked up to police officers, would never dream of, talking back or disrespecting that. And unfortunately, that times have changed. And
part of it, if I may weigh in there just a second with my 2 cents worth, part of it I think is media. Media is different today. They just are. I don't want to, beyond that, I'm not going to say anything more negative. I got a negative thought that I'm just going to keep to myself. But nationally, some of this division that we have, and it's a serious division in this country, nationally it's fanned by media. And we're going to talk about the sheriff's office here at Logan County, not anything that I can't control, as if we could control the sheriff in Logan County.
not so much.
Well, I tell you seriously, I watched this young man campaign. I knew about him before he threw his hat in the ring, and I was delighted that he did throw his hat in the ring, and was successful because he worked at it. We're in good shape.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Do you think that I'm kind of on a kick about drugs, and I'm so glad that the sovereign state of Illinois has decided that they're, by George, like it or not, we're going to legalize marijuana. Y'all come. And I think that's a stupid idea, but I'm sure they'd be vitally interested in how I feel about that.
Well, I had somebody in the street talk to us the other day. How's Busby feel about this legalization of marijuana? That was one of the 2 listeners we have.
But does that contribute
I believe that you're absolutely right that it's coming. I think that...
Well, Pritzker said so.
Right, and I think I tell you, in my whole life, and I just turned 50, so in my whole life, I haven't been around a long time, but a little bit, I never thought I'd see a politician campaign on a promise of legalizing drugs. So it's a paradigm shift for somebody like me who came into law enforcement in the early 90s. Obviously, the war on drugs started in the 70s with the whole catchphrase of this war on drugs. I will tell you that it's my personal opinion that Logan County does have a drug problem, without a doubt. We are in the midst of this opioid epidemic, and I think that one of the things that we have to realize, our catchphrase has always been marijuana is this gateway drug, which it is. I mean, it's just like alcohol. It's just it's if you're imbibing or you're
a drug is
using
a drug,
that,
no matter what
absolutely.
Form.
So I can tell you this, in all the search warrants that I've done on drug houses and cocaine and crack, I've never executed a search warrant where marijuana wasn't present. Now, I understand that they're looking at the revenue. I truly get it.
I know that, but I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe politicians across the board ought to think a little bit about the people and a little less about I want to have this and I want to have that and I want to have the other thing and I need money for all those things.
I agree. I think we're going to, again, my opinion, I think you're going to open up Pandora's box. And I've talked personally to law enforcement officers in other states where marijuana has been legalized, California, Washington, Colorado, places like that. And, they've just kind of read me in on some of their issues and what they've had to deal with. So I'm anticipating some of those similar problems. We're going to just have to adjust. Our legislators are the ones that implement these laws, and we're going to uphold the laws of the state as we're constitutionally sworn to do.
Yes.
I will tell you this, that I'll let you in on this little secret.
Okay. We won't tell a soul.
We won't tell anybody.
Yeah, Abel, turn the radio down.
One of the things that I am implementing here, and this is something that I talked about before I became sheriff. I'm going to re-implement our canine program at the Logan County Sheriff's Office. So this spring, we will be training a new canine dog and handler, and that'll be coming this spring.
That's expensive.
That is expensive. So,
Sheriff, how hampered are you by the budget restraints?
well, I think that every agency has to deal with those. I think everybody's been asked to do more with less. I tell you, one of the things that I truly don't understand are these unfunded mandates that we, continue to get put upon us. We have to be fiscally responsible. We have no choice, but some of the things that drive law enforcement we have no control over. The opioid epidemic, the number of incarcerated inmates that we have, our jail population that's doubled in the last 2 decades.
Doubled in the last 10 years.
Yeah, we went from, and again, the numbers are on my desk, they're not in my head, but from 2008 to 2018, our average daily jail population went from the mid-20s to we're constantly in near 50. So,
oh my!
Our jail was, obviously, you folks know, was completed in 1978. It was built for 30 people, and they added some bed space by doubling up on the cells, which made the spaces smaller. But we were able to. Our capacity is supposed to be 65. It really can't be that because of our isolation cells, because of our inmate populations that have to be separated because of conflicts. Clearly, we've got some issues in Logan County now with some gangs moving in, some drug violence moving in. You guys have been reading the papers and seeing the convictions that our phenomenal state's attorney's office has gotten here recently. So they are prosecuting, but we have to keep those folks separate. And with our limited space and size, that's an issue. We're ended up having to house inmates in other locations. It's just a tough situation, a tough sell, and that's one of the reasons that I'll be out this spring. We've got the referendum coming up on this next ballot for the public safety sales tax that is going to be used to expand the jail. That's what we're hoping to do. We are in a bind right now. There in our
78
jail.
was when that was erected.
Yes, sir. 1978.
That's a long time now.
Yeah, 40 years doesn't seem like a long time, but when you, I don't know that they anticipated the opioid crisis that we're currently under. I tell you, one of our primary issues, of female population has increased substantially.
Who thought that?
Right, and what we have, some of the constraints that we have, mental health has become a priority, and once they shut down some of the institutions that we used to have where we were able to place folks that needed that help, they've kind of tried to push that onto the criminal justice system. Well, you putting a mental health issue into a jail only compounds your problem. But we have no facilities in our jail because they didn't anticipate it at the time. There's no area for drug counseling. There's no area for pastoral counseling. There's no areas for mental health counseling. We have a combined space where our jail administrator sits right next to a nurse that we bring in and has to see medical people while he's trying to handle the day-to-day operations of the jail. So it's really just a tough position.
And with all due credit to your staff, there's been no way that they have been acclimated or trained to help people with mental issues. Certain things come along that they tell you this and tell you that, but experience in the field is the best teacher.
Absolutely.
And learning how to work with these people, that requires a special skill. The police officer's role, I would say, over the last decade or two has changed, and a lot of folks expect law enforcement to be social workers as well, and you have to have that ability to communicate, ability to understand and empathize with people, because a lot of times police officers maybe don't come from the same background as that subject they're dealing with.
But I tell you what, I'll tell you this for a fact, that I will take an individual who knows how to communicate with somebody. We can train the tactical aspect. We can train them how to be police officers and handcuff and do that stuff. But if you can talk to people, then that is an immediate plus, because you have to be socialized. One of the greatest things that I like to do with my administration is that I'm hiring these young people who believe they have an interest in law enforcement, and I'm hiring them into the jail, and I'm having them work as correctional officers for a couple of reasons. Number one, it gives me an opportunity to look at them as an employee. For another, it gives them the opportunity to see how those people actually interact when somebody comes into our jail for whatever reason. Sometimes they're agitated, sometimes they're animated. Either way, they're going to deal with, you're going to have to deal with that person. And I want to see how they react to that, how they react to conflict. Are they able to de-escalate a volatile situation? So it gives me the opportunity to view them and see if they have some of those traits that are necessary to work in this, line of work, and it also gives them the opportunity to see if this is what they really want to do, because some folks just don't like conflict, and you have to deal with conflict in this line of work, and you have to be able to talk to people who you necessarily wouldn't want to talk to, in your personal life. So,
it must be awfully difficult to train a person to deal with the issues that they will be facing if you come from an entirely different background than the people you'll be dealing with. You don't have a common starting place.
Here's what's really great about that specific point is that I just had a young man graduate from the police academy. I've got 2 young men graduating from the corrections academy today. All of those are from our area. They're from Logan County. They're local. So you know them, you know their families, and then they know a lot of folks in the area. So that helps. That's a plus. We send our police officers to a 14-week academy. So that's where they're going to get their foundation for law enforcement. And they get all of that training, and then when we bring them back, then they go through what we call our field training program, and that's a 4-month program. They will be assigned to 3 different field training officers, and they will work progressively to a point where their final month of FTO, field training officer program, they will actually be the officer in uniform and handling the calls, where their supervisor, their FTO, is just observing. So we get an opportunity to observe them, and hopefully over that 7-month span, they have the opportunity to see a variety of incidents. Now, trust me, I'm going in my 25th year here, and I see stuff, now that I've not ever seen before. So there's always going to be that, but it's how you deal with it, it's how you handle it, and I think we can all say that you can empathize with somebody even if you can't sympathize with them.
Yes.
So you have
speaking of observations, we've observed that it's good, very meaningful if we acknowledge our sponsors every Wednesday morning. And so go right ahead, Mr. Ash, and we'll acknowledge our sponsors. Both of you listeners out there, pay close attention. Yeah, we're right back live in the studios. Program, of course, this Wednesday morning at 8:15, or approximately there to us. Viewpoint, Judith K. Busby and the old fella here worked real hard to come up with some guests that I hope you're hanging on every word, particularly with our guest this morning, a young man whom I admire very, very much, and know also that he's a darn good sheriff. He paid his dues. He didn't get elected sheriff. He worked his way up through the ranks, and the voters were smart enough to bring him aboard to be our sheriff, and we're in good hands. Sheriff Mark Landers, tell us about your table of organization. Are you up to staff?
We're short right now,
and you earlier said you do have some hiring that's going on, or at least some applications you're going to consider.
Yes, sir. We have a current hiring process that's ongoing right now. We definitely need more patrol deputies. Currently, we are down a few, and we're trying to bolster that. Now we're doing, again, like I spoke earlier, we're doing more with less, but we're trying to get the staffing numbers back up to where they need to be. It's a tough environment in law enforcement. The applicant pool has gotten smaller. More agencies are competing for the same candidates. Like I said earlier, a lot of younger folks aren't wanting to go into this career, this line of work, and the ones that are, agencies are vying for them. So salaries and benefits and those types of things are always competitive, and we have to try and be competitive with agencies that are comparable to us.
And you only have so much money because you have a budget with you have to work, and so therefore you can't just say, well, we'll give this guy $25,000 or $30,000 just because we like him and think he's a good candidate. You have a budget you have to follow.
Right. We have a bargaining unit that we deal with, so there's that aspect of it, and it's a positive thing. You work together to make an organization, an agency that's beneficial to. You have to look at it like this. You have to look out for this community first and foremost, and then we'll look out for the agency, and then after that we'll deal with the rest.
Well, typical of most offices in our county, I would say maybe perhaps Judith K., all the offices in our county, when you walk in that door, you're going to be met with somebody who's got a smile and has a helpful attitude, and that's important in all those county offices, but perhaps it's more important in the sheriff's office because a lot of people walk in there and they've got their neck bowed for some reason or another.
Yeah.
And
I am blessed. I will tell you this, the sheriff's office in this community are blessed that we have two I'll just call them what they are, executive assistants that have been with the county for more than 30 years each, Tina Feldman and Tina O'Hara. Yeah. And they are the face of the agency. Whether you walk into my office over at the courthouse or you walk into my office at the jail annex, those are the two that you're going to first meet. And they're just wonderful people. There's so much institutional knowledge between those two that I told them they've got to be here as long as I am. I'm not accepting any resignation
grandmothered them
letters.
in, not grandfathered. We grandmothered them in, and thank goodness, because you spoke to my point. Because you walk into those offices in the courthouse, and then of course over to jail, and some people go through those doors with a kind of an attitude, and the ladies know how to diffuse that attitude and take care of them. And send the culprit away with a better attitude.
We have one of the things that we've had to address is the security measures at the courthouse. To speak to your point about folks coming in agitated or not in their best state, we've seen an uptick in levels or incidents of violence in our courtrooms. We talked about respecting law enforcement officers, but there were folks back in our generation that you never talked back to, and that was a judge. If they were a black robe, you didn't mess around, and we're unfortunately seeing that level of disrespect is even carrying into our courtrooms. Yeah. So,
gee, we used to think the bad angel would get you if you didn't respect the guy in the dress.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'll let you say that, Judy. I'm not going to say that with our judges.
Boy.
But, I'll coin a phrase, and I'll take it from another gentleman who said that security isn't always convenient. It's kind of a hassle having to go through a metal detector to get into the courthouse, but public safety's got to be first and foremost. And, we've implemented that not just with the public, but with all the employees. So everybody's going through the security measures. We've got deputies assigned to the courthouse now. It's just a necessity of our time. So fortunately, we've got good guys and girls, good young men and young women who are willing to talk to people, help them deal with that problem, and hopefully de-escalate any issues that we have.
In your 25 years in law enforcement, what area of criminal activity seems to have increased the most?
Technology, number one. Every crime, I would say almost every crime without exception, has some aspect of technology, whether that's a cell phone, Facebook, social media, computer, and then sex crimes. I mean, our sex crimes are getting to be significantly higher, I guess. We've been dealing with those in the last 10 years for sure. You know, there's days where, there's weeks where there's not a day that some sort of allegation doesn't come in, you know, and whether it's coming from DCFS, whether it's coming from, you know, just a victim who's reporting it, those are the two things that are getting tough. So much so that they're implementing new training mandates for sex assault training, basically at patrol level as well as investigation level. Technology is one of the things that we've talked about that we have to keep up on, because these kids nowadays, this social media, the Snapchat and the Instagram and the images and things like that, I don't know that these kids understand that stuff that they do and the images that they request and send and want to deal with are just, that's forever, you know. And
I don't think they do understand that, do you?
No, and I think that there's so many predators out there that are trying to you know, get access to these young people, that they think they're talking to a 14-year-old, another 14-year-old, and it ends up being some, you know, older
snarky guy who's about 38.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but our levels of our levels of incidence of sex crimes is certainly increasing, and technology is one of the things that we're constantly battling to try to get in front of.
How come? I would think that would be something that could be dealt with if people just understood. How come they don't understand that the person that they're meeting and greeting on the cell phone may be lying through his teeth?
Mostly.
Probably.
Well, it's naivete. Kids, this social media thing is kind of a dangerous thing.
It's really a phenomenon that that there's actually training on it now, and we have to. I don't know. I wish I did have that answer. I'm sure that we would all be wealthy if we could figure out a way for that to work. That there's so many wonderful things about technology. You have the world at your fingertips. You can, you know, Google any question in the world. You don't need a Encyclopedia Britannica set, you know, on your in your.
And you may not necessarily get the answer that you should have either.
Right, and there's so many avenues and paths through malicious malware and clickbait and all this stuff where these kids are clicking on things and going someplace where maybe they never intended to go. It's just it's a tough world, and it's something that it's a struggle for law enforcement, because the cost associated with training investigators in that technology is extensive. We've talked about amongst the executives, the law enforcement executives, and our state's attorney's office, trying to pool our resources and maybe train one person or two persons that could actually be called in, regardless of where the violation occurred, whether it's city or county, or you know, and that we could have a pooled resource where we're able to pull that investigator and use them on investigations of that nature.
That's changed so much, hasn't it?
It has.
You know, the bottom line is we've just lost respect for one another.
I agree. I think that if people would just, again, go back to that, this is going to sound corny, if you would just go back to that golden rule and treat others the way you wanted to be treated.
Well, that's kind of an archaic thing, the golden rule.
I do so. I believe so.
Nobody seems to even know how to spell golden, let alone rule.
It comes down to respect. Just treat each other with respect. Yeah. And
unfortunately, a lot of it begins at home. And again, we're faced with this socioeconomic problem of parents that have to work, both parents. The home is empty for the greater part of the day. School's not important in that case, because all they're thinking about is getting home and see whatever they can get on the internet, and there's just a myriad of reasons, and all of which added up are the answer.
I totally agree. It's tough in this day and age. You don't have we're not, you know, the 1950s anymore, where Dad went and worked, and that was enough to sustain the home. That's not how it is anymore, and that's an unfortunate aspect of our society. And the kids get...
Well, I think we're too far down the pike to change that now, but it's our own fault that we got here, because everybody has to have 2 fancy cars in the garage. Man, when you were learning to drive, did they give you the family Cadillac? Not so much, huh?
No, man.
Sheriff, your youngsters I'll say youngsters advisedly. In my case, anybody under the 70s young. Seriously, when you have a candidate that you want to train, where do you send your officer candidates for training?
So we started sending our recruits to the Macon County Law Enforcement Training Center.
Macon County, well, that's not that far.
It's brand new. Sheriff Buffett had donated the funds for that facility to be constructed, and it's a phenomenal facility. Director Tad Williams over there and Deputy Director Tom Schneider are phenomenal instructors, and they brought a level of professionalism and discipline. One of the things that I look for in new recruits, if they have no prior military service, one of the things that you can always say about prior military is that they've gone through basic, they've gone through a disciplined environment, instruction, that they can follow orders. And young people that maybe have not experienced that don't know what that means, because as much as we are a civilian organization, there's a rank structure, there's discipline that's necessary. If you're having to react to violence or crime, you need to be capable of following those orders from your supervisor, and that's one of the things that they instill in this academy. So we're very pleased with, we just got, again, our first recruit back from the academy a couple weeks ago. We're very pleased with how his training went, and he's currently in his first month of field training and doing very well. So they will all be going to that academy from this point forward.
Well, Sheriff Buffett spending his money in Macon County, we get the benefit of that by being able to send our candidates over there.
Absolutely.
To that.
Absolutely. And they actually have the Corrections Academy as well. That's where both of the young men will be graduating from today. So I'll be making a trip over to Decatur this afternoon to observe their graduation ceremony.
You mentioned a little bit ago about the opioid crisis. Maybe it's wishful thinking. I was hoping we were exempt from that being a rural area, but apparently I was mistaken.
It's
again.
The rural areas are the ones being most hardest hit.
Oh, really?
You're right. It's funny, the demographics of these are, our victims are, there's a wide range. It's not limited to an inner city area. It's everywhere. It's young, it's old, it's male, it's female, it's black, it's white. It doesn't matter. It's these young kids, and I will attribute it. And there's proven documentation that we over-medicated, and this trend went back to pain management, and narcotics were prescribed, and it just got to a point where I think that everybody now that's involved in this fight, the medical field, law enforcement, the courts, has realized that we've got to try and turn this ship around, but it's such a huge boat.
And the doctors sometimes, or maybe often, not sometimes, are very careful about that, because they don't want to prescribe something that is going to hook somebody.
Absolutely.
And so therefore many patients maybe have to put up with the pain they shouldn't have to put up with.
Right. That thought, and I think that's what's happened, is that pendulum swung so far the other way. But again, I won't speak for the medical field. I can only speak to the fact that they are asking now. Their levels of pain, and they're not prescribing like maybe they had previously. So it's a tough situation, and we'll get reports daily with people that I lost my prescription of whatever it is, opioid, 120 pills. I need a police report so I can go get another bottle of that. So we constantly fight that battle as well. So it's tough.
I hadn't thought about it. So they can come to the sheriff's office?
If somebody has a prescription stolen from them, they have to make a police report if they're going to, try to get another prescription. But sometimes we see that that's, just a method of trying to obtain more medication.
Gender-wise on your staff, how many females do you have on your staff? Is there a required number, or is it?
No, we're always seeking good candidates, male or female. That's one of the things that I don't look at. I'm looking for whoever is best qualified for that position. We currently don't have any female patrol deputies. We do have female correctional staff, but no current patrol deputies. We currently have some applicants that have tested, and they'll be going through the process. And my hope is that we can, reflect our community and have both male and female. So again, I just look at best candidates, regardless of, gender or race or any of that good stuff.
Sheriff Flanders, if money were not the question, what would you do today to change in your office? What would you seek?
If money were no object.
Yeah.
If wishes were horses, even paupers would ride.
Which obviously
right?
it always is. But just what is the one need that you see for your office?
Our jail expansion. That's the priority right now for us. It has to be. We need to offer more services in our corrections facility because the bottom line is we've learned that you can't just keep stacking people in jail for drug use and things like that. It doesn't work. I mean, we need to change the behavior. We need to change the mindset. In order to do that, you got to have the counseling. You got to have, all those stages and steps that are necessary in rehabilitation and addiction counseling. You got to have those. And personnel. That's what I would do. Right now, we currently work with a staffing of 6 correctional officers, and we've had that number for, I would say, decades, and our jail population has doubled.
You only have 6 on your staff as correctional officers?
6 full-timers, right? So we
That's not many to cover this county.
It's not at all. That's correctional staff.
Yes.
So it's not enough. We have to compensate with other employees. So we need to increase our staffing levels in the jail for safety, for security. So if money were no option, it would be the jail expansion and then increase the number of correctional officer and patrol deputies that I have, because I could do so much with more people. We could create that street crimes unit that I talked about wanting to do and have people focus on the violent crimes, on getting the guns and the drugs off the streets. I'd add multiple canine units. We've just implemented and purchased tasers for deputies. We've not that's new for us. Our deputies have not carried tasers in the past, and I just implemented that policy, and we've purchased tasers for our deputies and correctional staff and court security.
Seems to be very naive to me that I just assumed that our officers would be able to carry tasers.
Typically, law enforcement does. We just had not in the past, and I felt that it was just something that would benefit our folks. And then, prior to my election, Sheriff Nichols and I had talked, and with the incidents that had happened in the courtroom and with some of our court security getting injured during these violent events, we had talked, and that was one of the things that was going to be implemented under my administration. So that's what I decided to do, was purchase those, and it was an investment, but to me, one well worth it. The security, it's safer for our police officers and correctional staff, and honestly, it's safer for the subjects who are combative, because it immediately eliminates the combativeness. And as you guys know, you've seen the television, you've seen the shows, when people are engaged in physical confrontation, things happen, people get hurt, and we want to try to avoid that at all costs. So having that option available in the use of force continuum is a huge plus. So I'm implementing that.
I read somewhere that one need in law enforcement is for more counselors, for mental health type people. Do you feel that that's
Well,
true?
I truly believe that Illinois has a crisis of mental health, without a doubt. I don't want to quote percentages, but I can tell you that I'm looking into having mental health counselors come into our jail on a weekly basis. It's finding the funding for that, just like our nurses do. I mean, it's, you know how it is, folks, the level of mental health issues that are present, especially in populations that are involved in drug usage and alcohol, and whether it's a coexisting issue or whatever, they're dealing with addiction and mental health issues, and you gotta address both of them. But we absolutely need mental health counselors, and that's one of the advantages, or one of the things that would be implemented in a new facility. excuse me, is a secure area for mental health counselors to come to the jail and meet with clients in order to hopefully get them on the right track. At least address some of their issues.
The amount of training, let's say you go to Macon, you send a candidate over to Macon County, it's not certain that he's going to be hired until he goes through that course over there. Right. And then he can be evaluated and see how that went with him or her, as the case may be.
That's what a lot of folks, I don't know if they understand the law enforcement hiring process. It's not just hiring somebody and they go to work that day. It's 7 months from the time I hire an individual until they're actually performing individually as an officer. And it's another year or two before they're comfortable, as a police officer. But it starts with the testing process. If they get through that, then there's a mandatory power test, which is a physical test that's required by the state. They've got to pass the academy successfully, and then they do their field training program. They're probationary employees for the first year. So we get an opportunity to evaluate, and you have to trust your FTOs. I always say that the FTO is the most important cog in this machine, because that's your person who's training your brand new officer. He's putting a stamp on that person that's going to last far after I'm here or anybody else is here, because he's molding that brand new person on what's expected, what the performance levels are going to be. So it's very important that those FTOs are the right people. And currently I've got a solid cadre of FTO that are some of our, honestly, they're our top performers. They're very professional. They know what I expect, and they're implementing that into the system. So I'm really happy with what we've got going on right now. I'm excited, and I've said this a few times since in the last 45 days, and it seems like it's been a lot longer than that, but the first 45 days, it's very stressful, but I'm not stressed. I am having a ball, and I'm enjoying it, and I think that the agency's really in a good place.
Well, Sheriff Nichols gave him a pat on the shoulder and said, "Good luck, son."
He did.
Sheriff Mark Landers, we're happy that you took your time out of your busy schedule today. We appreciate it, particularly, Mark, with all the road situations and so forth. And by the way, there's a kudo that we might pass on to.
Yes.
For all the folks who get out there, no matter what hour of the day it is, to be trying to clear your roads. Let's understand that they have more than Union Street to take care of.
Yeah.
Roads in the county are all very, very important to each and every resident out there. Mark Landers, thanks very much for being with us. I always try to come up with a comment that's appropriate for the day. And I spent some time last night trying to find a comment on law enforcement, and all of them were so lofty and so philosophical and so self-serving. I decided to heck with it. I just used my own, and that would be the reason somebody smiled today. Thank you, Mark Landers, very much.
Thank you for having me.